Now, this topic is sure to blow a lot of people's minds because you're going to hear about things that are more likely to be imagined in a science fiction movie than in reality. Of course, as with all leaked but otherwise classified information, you don't have to take everything you see or hear for granted, but there is no doubt that the basis of the story that follows is true, even if the details may differ. Much of the information given is taken from a book on the subject, Transylvanian Sunrise, by Radu Sinamar. So fasten your seatbelts. It's a tricky subject even for those who are otherwise able to think with an absolutely open mind. Around 2009, 2010, the exact year is not known, a very interesting and unique program was broadcast on a Romanian television channel in which the people involved talked about a subject that could fundamentally change the fate of humanity and rewrite the history books, if it would be let. The program might have disappeared into oblivion, but after it was broadcast, the producers of the program received death threats, which they recorded and which were also shown as part of a program. It was at this point that the heads of people who had not taken the matter seriously started to roll. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's look at the events that preceded the ominous broadcast on the subject of the TV show we will be discussing shortly. Towards the end of the 1990s, a number of regular small earthquakes were recorded in the Busteni Sinaia area, which lies at the foot of the Bucegi Mountains, between 8 p.m. and 3 a.m. Experts from the National Institute of Geophysics and the Cheia Seismic Station found that the epicenter of the tremors was not in the Vrancea area, as it was first thought, but in the Bucegi Mountains. The following year, the intensity of the earthquakes increased and was felt by most people in the area. It was strange that each time a muffled sound of unknown origin could be heard before the quakes occurred, which was confirmed by residents in the Busteni area. According to mountain rescuer and mountaineer Nicolae Blegu, the earthquakes were strong enough to be felt by everyone. This continued until 1999, when these unexplained tremors suddenly stopped. In 2002, however, an earthquake that lasted for nearly 5 hours terrified the residents, revealing the opening of a previously unknown cave in the Bucegi Mountains. Opinions differ as to who found this fissure and under what circumstances, but perhaps it is not important. The main thing is that in the summer of 2003, a top-secret section of the Romanian Intelligence Service, Department 0, began investigating the uncovered entrance and the vast halls and tunnels behind it. The United States of America has learned of the unprecedented discovery and that the Romanian government wants to make the whole world aware of what has been found. The U.S. was thus forced to exert colossal diplomatic pressure on the Romanian government to keep the discovery in secret. The U.S. and the Romanian Secret Service have been working together ever since. For the Romanian side, Radu Sinamar, an expert in the Romanian Intelligence Service's occult division, he wrote the aforementioned book, Transylvanian Sunrise, and Cezar Brad, a supervisor in the same occult division, were the operational leaders of the research. The Pentagon satellite for geodetic spying, based on bionic technology and shape waves, has detected a separate unit in a specific area of the Bucegi Mountains. The empty space inside the mountain was clearly artificial and looked as if it had been carved from the inside. It was clearly not a cave. A satellite scan of the mountain range revealed 2 large energy blocks. These were a kind of dams made of artificial energy. The first was like an energetic wall that blocked access to the tunnel, while the second was dome, or hemisphere, shaped and located at the far end of the tunnel, near the center of the mountain. The tunnel and the dome were strangely aligned with the rock formations at the top of the mountain known as Babel and the Sphinx of Bucegi. Not incidentally, the energy wall of the hemispherical dome has the same vibrational frequency and shape as another top-secret underground structure discovered earlier near Baghdad, Iraq, about which no information had been leaked to the world until now. Interestingly, shortly after this discovery in the Middle East, the war in Iraq broke out, and within a few months the Americans had access to it and were able to investigate the biggest secret in the area, which even the Iraqis knew nothing about. Following the Pentagon's identification of similarities between the Baghdad and Bucegi subterranean structures, Cezar Brad was visited by a very important figure in May 2003 with the intervention of the Romanian Secret Service. The man, known only as Massini, was Italian, probably using an alias, but he spoke Romanian very well and knew the country well. The Secret Service informed Brad that Massini is a high-ranking leader of a Masonic lodge in Italy, as well as one of the most influential Masonic organizations in the world, the Bilderberg Group, which has very significant financial and political influence in Romania. According to Brad, Massini was initially almost in panic because this underground facility, which was much larger and more complex than the one in Iraq, was in Romania. Finally, excavation began. The first major discovery was made about 60 to 70 meters from the first energy wall, or energy shield. It was a tunnel with perfectly smooth walls, shaped like a subway tunnel. The second big discovery came at the end of the tunnel, when a massive stone gate was found, protected by an invisible energy shield. The 3 soldiers of the 1st Special Intervention Unit tried to touch the gate, but when they reached the energy barrier, their hearts immediately stopped and they collapsed dead, and any object such as stone, plastic, metal, or wood thrown against the energy shield immediately turned into fine dust. I think this is the point in the video where most of you will turn it off, or you will post an indignant comment about how can so much nonsense be made up. However, the best is yet to come. But before, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to my channel if you like what you see so you won't miss out on my upcoming videos. Thank you. Now you may ask, if there is an energy wall that killed 3 people, how did the team get through the stone gate? On the wall of the tunnel, directly between the gate and the energy shield, was an area of 20 square centimeters on which an isosceles triangle was drawn at its base. Cesar Brad felt that there was a kind of compatibility between the energetic barrier and himself, a kind of mutual vibration. When he touched the surface of the energy shield lightly with his hand, he felt a tingling sensation on his skin, but the shield was completely harmless to him. Bard stepped forward and, to the consternation of the team, walked smoothly over it. He touched the triangle, and the gigantic stone door slid soundlessly to the left, into the wall, and the energy shield disappeared. As to how Cesar was able to penetrate the otherwise lethal shield, it was concluded that above a certain level of consciousness or vibration, the energy shield is simply harmless to those who touch it. This is how they finally made their way into the huge room that was later named the Great Gallery. Although there was no visible light source, the Great Gallery was perfectly lit. After the first energy shield was removed and the door opened, the huge hemispherical shield at the other end of the room tuned to a higher vibration and began to emit a higher radiation. And here we take a detour. When Cesar contacted the energy shield of the Baghdad structure was also activated and pulsed at a higher frequency. It became clear that the 2 hemispherical energy shields were in direct contact with each other. This is basically how the Iraqi base was informed that there were people inside the Romanian base. They learned of this later when a member of the group, a U.S. national security advisor, received a call informing him of this. But let's get back to Romania. After taking a closer look at the wall of the Great Gallery, they felt it synthetic, but at the same time, they felt as if something organic were part of it too. It was oil-colored, but the reflections were green and blue. The wall was a little rough to the touch and could not be scratched. It resisted any attempt to break, puncture, or cut it. Scientists later tried to burn the material, but mysteriously the flames were somehow engulfed in it, leaving it intact. American scientists agreed that the material of the wall is actually a mysterious combination of organic and inorganic materials. After 80 to 85 meters, the gallery suddenly ended in a huge 30 meters high and 100 meters long hall. This room, called the projection room, was smaller in size and was also protected by an energy shield. As the group moved towards the shield, part of it disappeared to form a doorway, allowing access to the interior of the energy shield. Basically, this shield formed this hemispherical dome with curved walls and ceiling. At the back of the room, at a height of about 10 to 12 meters, the shield ended where it touched the stone wall of the dome. There were 3 large tunnel openings in this wall, one in the center and 2 on either side, symmetrically arranged. These were lit by a greenish diffused light. Along the right and left walls, 5 to 5 huge 2 meters high stone tables were arranged in rows, following the circular arc of the walls. Scientists later used special scaffoldings to see what was on the surface of the tables. The tabletops were decorated with precisely carved reliefs, various signs of an unknown script and characters reminiscent of ancient cuneiform writing. The writing also included more general symbols, such as triangles and circles. It was found that these signs were not painted, yet they glowed with a fluorescent light of a different color at each table. On some tables were various objects that looked like some kind of technical equipment. Many of these devices had translucent whitish wires attached to the inside of a shiny, silvery, brick-shaped box that was on the floor. The cables were found to be extremely flexible and lightweight, with pulses of light inside them that circulated along the entire length of the wires. When they examined the tabletops more closely, they found that they were covered with a dark, glass-like material. This was divided into several large squares, bounded by straight lines which formed a sort of grid. Every time someone touched one of the squares, it automatically activated a kind of holographic projection showing aspects of a particular discipline. These holographic three-dimensional images were absolutely perfect and nearly 2.5 meters high and were fully automated and interactive, changing according to which square on the surface of the tables was touched. One table contained information from the field of biology and projected images of plants and animals, some of which were completely unknown to scientists. After touching one of the squares, a hologram of the human body structure was activated and rotated continuously, highlighting different areas of the human body. Touching another square activated a holographic projection of extraterrestrial beings from other planetary systems. By tapping two different squares simultaneously, a complex scientific analysis was projected, depicting the DNA of both species and the compatibility possibilities between them. At the end of the simulation, the result of crossing the two species was displayed. On the sides of the hologram, vertical lines of text in unidentified characters appeared, which the researchers believe could be explanations related to the images. While this discovery alone is like a science fiction story come to life, scientists have been asking themselves, who could have created the complex? Judging by the dimensions of the objects in the projection room, the creators must have been much taller than humans, and this brings us to the theory of the existence of giants, another subject that divides people. The Romanian press once reported the discovery of giant humanoid skeletons in Romania, and according to the article, the newspaper team was accompanied by researcher Vasile Rudan, who noted that the inhabitants of the village of Bozioru had concrete evidence, a cemetery with giant skeletons. It was accidentally discovered more than 20 years ago when the authorities decided to plant apple trees in the village. While digging on a hill, the villagers found huge skeletons, more than 2.4 meters high. Ilia Dragoi, a man from the village, drove the newspaper editors and Rudan to the scene. Mr. Ilia told them that there were giants' graves everywhere.
We were digging holes for saplings when we found a human head the size of a pumpkin. None of us had ever seen anything like it. We were all amazed. Digging further, we found some leg bones, the length of vines. The entire skeleton must have been very large.
Well, after this little detour, let's go back to the interior of the Busegi. Holograms projected from tables in the projection room provided detailed information on subjects ranging from biology to physics, cosmology, astronomy, architecture, technology, genetics, and even religion. The wealth of information here made it feel like a library. In the middle of the room was a podium-like platform on which stood an interesting instrument. Researchers believed that this device could enhance brain waves and brain functions. Next to it was what looked like a control panel, covered with different geometric symbols in different colors. In the middle of the panel were two sliding levers and a red button, which, when pressed, brought up a startling holographic simulation. The researchers saw the Carpathians from an altitude of 25 kilometers, after which huge amounts of water flooded the lowlands and plains. Then, new mass of water emerged from Romania, Hungary, and Ukraine, forming gigantic rivers that flowed towards the Transylvanian plateau. The image focused on Romania, where much of the surface is covered by water so vast that even the highest mountain peaks look like tiny floating islands. And when the levers were pulled, the water mass in the holographic simulation started to recede, leaving only a small area underwater near the Retezat Godianu mountain range. Behind the control panel was a square pedestal, about 3 meters on each side, on which rested a mysterious amphora. As it turned out, Massini knew of its existence. For him and for the Masonic elite, this was the most important discovery. Inside the amphora was a very fine white powder, which the researchers later found to be a high-purity monatomic gold powder of unknown crystal structure. This, in its pure form, greatly stimulates certain energetic waves and energy exchanges at the cellular and neural level, which in turn causes an accelerated rejuvenation process. Researchers say that in theory, a person can live for thousands of years in the same physical body, provided that they consume a well-defined amount of monatomic gold dust from time to time. This may explain the unusually long lives of some very important personalities. Who knows? Behind the amphora, in the center of the square, stood a huge dome projecting moving holograms that revealed every major aspect of humanity's most distant past, from the very beginning. Cesar Brad said that based on what we have seen, around 90% of the official history of mankind is false and falsified, and as it is becoming increasingly apparent today, Darwin's theory of evolution is also wrong. He added that although it may seem unbelievable, what we now take for granted and completely evident about things that happened in our history, in fact never happened, while the so-called myths and legends are almost entirely true. Most archaeological theories are also wrong. For example, dinosaurs did not become extinct 65 million years ago, and the old continents of Lemuria and Atlantis, which even today are rejected out of hand by science, did exist. And the period covered by the projections was hundreds of thousands of years. The hologram also presented fragments of the spiritual lives of other figures from humanity's distant past, including people of whom we know nothing today, but who must have been exceptional and important if they were placed here. And in a disturbing series of holographic images, scientists got also answer to one of the biggest questions that has haunted mankind for 2,000 years. Did Jesus exist? Was he a real historical figure or a fiction? Well, it was clear from the holographic projections that Jesus was a real person, and the images also showed his crucifixion. The screenings also revealed that many of those who witnessed the crucifixion came from other historical periods. They wore the same clothes as the people of the time, but their facial features were different, so their faces were constantly covered. Let's stop here for a moment. So, did the scientists or researchers or group, whatever you want to call them, actually see Jesus? Did they see what he really looked like? If so, I personally lack any detail of his appearance or the circumstances of his crucifixion. For example, I wonder if Jesus looked the same as he is depicted on paintings nearly since 2,000 years. The other is, does this mean that time travel exists? After all, there were participants from other times who obviously had to know what was going to happen. There is much that is strange and incomprehensible to the human mind, but there is more to come in the next section, in which I will talk about the tunnels and the chambers in and at the end of them. I understand if you are totally skeptical about what you have heard, and feel free to write in the comments what you think about all of this. If you liked this video, like it, and be sure to check back for my previous videos and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'll be back with the next part soon. Thanks for your attention. See you in next video.